In the final years of his life, Walt Disney had a dream: to create a meticulously planned city that would represent and inspire the future of community. This is the Epcot story.
I don't believe there's a challenge anywhere in the world that's more important to people everywhere than finding solutions to the problems of our cities. But where do we begin? How do we start answering this great challenge?
By this point in his life, Walt Disney had already opened Disneyland. It was already a world icon. It was already considered the best theme park ever built. And Walt Disney was already thinking about what was next. Disney's executives, along with the rest of the world, were pressuring Walt to create a second Disneyland. But Walt wasn't interested in that. Instead, he wanted to focus on something bigger, solving the problems with modern communities. The first step in achieving this vision of a better tomorrow was to decide its location. The team at Disney had already decided upon the eastern US for their next big project, but hadn't decided exactly where. Several areas of the country were considered, even including Niagara Falls. But Disney eventually decided upon Orlando, Florida, due to its incredibly convenient freeway system and ease of access from the rest of the country. Disney had a problem though. They needed a lot of land in order to maintain complete control over the areas surrounding their Florida developments, something Walt had regretted not doing for his park in California. They needed so much land, in fact, that it would be impossible to hide that the purchases were being made by Disney. In order to keep his new project secret and also to keep land costs reasonable, Disney set up several dummy corporations to buy up the land in small pieces. In all, over 48 square miles of land was purchased, with some of the plots going for as little as $100 an acre. This was all done without much more than a local rumor tying these purchases back to Disney, with local whispers that the Rockefeller family or even Howard Hughes were behind the massive land buys. But finally, on November 15, 1965, Walt Disney announced his expansion into Florida.
We have many things in mind that could make this unique and different than Disneyland.
Will it be at Disneyland?
Well, I've always said there will never be another Disneyland, Governor. And I think it's going to work out that way.
Finally, Walt had the land, almost 50 square miles, and he had the goal, to improve and perfect the modern community. But how exactly was he going to achieve that? The basis of Disney's plan for Epcot was twofold: overhauling transportation and meticulously planning every aspect of its layout and governance. Within Epcot, there would be no need for cars. Residents would rely on two primary modes of transportation within the city. The monorail would serve as the main source of transportation between Epcot and the other main Disney areas of this new Florida project, and the Woodway People Mover would be used within the city of Epcot itself. A quick note, if you'd like to learn more about the People Mover and its history at Disneyland, click on the link above or in the description. Truck deliveries at Epcot would be made via underground tunnels, and an entire underground freeway would be used for those passing through and for residents who did own cars. Epcot's layout would have radiated outward, with its commercial and downtown areas being located at the very center. This entire area would have been completely enclosed and would have been partly inspired by Disney's experience at the World's Fair. With that in mind, there would have been a world showcase of sorts, which would have sold food and goods from different parts of the world. At the center of this commercial development would have sat an enormous hotel, able to have been seen for miles around. Radiating outward from there would have been the Greenbelt, an enormous park which would have completely encircled the center of Epcot. In addition to the park itself, churches, community centers, schools, and more would have been built there. Beyond the Greenbelt would have been the residential areas. Most of this area would have been taken up by high-capacity apartment housing, which is where most of Epcot's residents and workers would have lived. Beyond the apartments would have been low-density housing, where the remainder of Epcot's residents would have called home. Everyone that lived within Epcot would have had to have a job within the community. This means no retirees, no low-income developments, and no jobless residents. None of the residents, including those living in houses, would have owned their own land. This would ensure that Disney would be able to keep up with the community as a whole, and make sure that the entire development always kept up with modern technology. By Disney's own theory, this meant that those living within Epcot would sometimes wake up to new, state-of-the-art appliances or other technological advancements within their homes without their involvement whatsoever. One of Walt's primary goals with Epcot was to continue to embrace new technology across the board. To help do this, he decided to try and attract the world's major corporations to utilize office space within Epcot and work together on future technological advancements. From solving problems with intercity transportation to reducing lack of technological advancement due to corporate rivalry, Walt Disney was determined to fix the modern world's problems with Epcot. The other executives at Disney were less concerned with that, however, and were more concerned with creating another Disneyland in Florida. To make a long story short, Walt relented and included a new Disney park in his plans for Florida. He did make sure that Epcot would be front and center, though, within what he referred to as the Florida Project. With this much design work done and all of the land purchased, what ended up happening to Walt's dream? The planning for Disney's Florida expansion really took off in the mid-1960s, and its announcement happened just over a year from Walt's death. In his final days, Walt even used his hospital room's ceiling tiles to sketch out Epcot to scale. Epcot truly was Walt's masterpiece, and he was determined for it to be his final legacy. Once Walt passed away, his brother Roy took over the Epcot project. Unfortunately, though, the rest of the executives at Disney couldn't justify Epcot's construction without Walt's involvement. The team at Disney instead decided just to move forward with the theme park in Florida, scrapping all plans for Epcot in the process. Over the next several years, bits and pieces of Walt's original vision for Epcot would take shape within Walt Disney World. The contemporary resort would later be designed with Walt's styling of Epcot in mind. Disney also worked with the government to create the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which basically allows Disney to govern Walt Disney World as if it's a city itself. They ended up using some of Walt's transportation concepts as well, with the monorail and even underground tunnels below the Magic Kingdom both proving invaluable to Disney World's success. Several years would go by without mention of Epcot from the Disney executives, but the idea would later be modified into a second theme park for Walt Disney World. The Imagineers at Disney designed a park that would follow some of the same core concepts as Disney's original version for the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, and worked up two designs. One that incorporated and educated guests on the world of high technology, and one that featured an extensive world showcase, tying several of the world's cultures together for all guests to experience. The story goes that one day an Imagineer pushed both models together, creating a park that was more in line with Walt's involvement with the New York World's Fair. This is the Epcot that we know today, and it opened on October 1st, 1982. Over the years, Epcot the theme park has changed dramatically. A period of decline forced the closure of what some now consider classic Epcot attractions, and more modern, intense attractions were brought in. But many of Walt Disney's core concepts for Epcot remain: a strong focus on modern technology and bringing the world's cultures together in harmony. With that in mind, Walt's own words on the creation of Epcot still ring true, over 50 years later.
So that's what Epcot is, an experimental prototype community that will always be in a state of becoming. It will never cease to be a living blueprint of the future, where people actually live a life they can't find anywhere else in the world.
But even more of Walt's concepts for Epcot would finally see the light of day in a city itself, Celebration, Florida. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon, because we'll get into that story in a future episode. So, what do you think? Would Epcot have survived if it was built as Walt had originally intended? Do you like Walt Disney World as it turned out today, and do you feel like Walt Disney would feel the same way? Let us know in the comments down below, and always remember to like and subscribe for more episodes of Disney Declassified.